Happy Wednesday, stoners and friends, and welcome to another great episode of Cannabis News, now in our 11th year of bringing you the stories both empowering and devastating as legalization of cannabis has continued to impact our communities. Today, we're going to tackle the question of homelessness in Denver and its relation, or not, to legalization. There are a lot of opinions out there about whether or not cannabis taxes help the homeless, and specifically whether legalization is driving an increase in homeless populations in Denver and surrounding Colorado communities. So October 2014, that's the golden year for golden terpenes from Golden, Colorado to the plains east of Aurora and everywhere else in the state for that matter. Cannabis was made recreationally legal in the state through the hard work and decades of effort from activists, politicians, and community members dedicated to changing perceptions of hemp and cannabis. Part of the agreement was that recreational cannabis would garner added taxes that could fund important projects. Schools were the first on the docket, along with spending for roads and other infrastructure upgrades.
Dilemmas of life, wanting to grab the knife and carve away the never-ending thoughts that snuffed out the peace of innocence, as wanting peace these days seems so innocent, to the extent of self-defying feats, using our feet to kick rocks into the distant collisions of walls that we built, now struggling to take them apart. So I start from the beginning of my sins, as the end is just another means to an end, extending love to friends and family, as my chismo shit talking turns us into enemies. Don't keep me in your box, don't keep me in your box, not the brunt of every joke or the soul you like to poke. Don't keep me in your box, don't keep me in your box, not the brunt of every joke or the soul you like to poke.
Now, Good People News reported right here, according to the Department of Revenue, a state-run office, records show that by the end of the 2015 fiscal year, a whopping $996,184,780 worth of cannabis was sold in Colorado alone. And I quote, "These sales translated into more than 135 million in," and I quote, "marijuana taxes and fees for 2015, up from 76 million since its inception in 2014. The state further promised 35 million of this money would go to build new schools," end quote.
Hello everyone, how you doing, stoners? This is Janet Green, the biggest stoner from OG. I'm going to tell you my biggest joke today, and it's really funny, of me smoking weed and doing something funny. But I got to get high first, just a second. Okay, this is going to be my last take, because if you notice, that's all I got left. All right, people. I was washing hair in my kitchen because, of course, I am a kitchen beautician. And we were at the kitchen sink. And what else is at the kitchen sink besides what? Shampoo. I had dish soap. So as I put her head under the water, I grabbed the dish soap. And yes, I did wash her hair with it. But of course, I added some to it. So it was really funny because we were both what? High. I'm funny.
Change comes at you fast, but change can also be brutally slow to move the gears on social change. It took until 2016 to begin applying funds to social programs beyond education. First reported by the Huffington Post in 2016 after Aurora passed a resolution to fund resources for the homeless through cannabis-derived tax dollars. And I quote, "In addition to allocating $1.5 million to helping homeless people, about $680,000 will be set aside for city, nonprofits, and $2 million will be used to issue bonds to build a new recreation center in Southeast Aurora. Now, $1.5 million for resources supporting the unhoused in Aurora alone, that's great news and an important start in all of this. Now, Vox reported on the allocations in May 2016, adding that, and I quote, although it's obviously a lot of money for a layperson, 1.5 million isn't actually that big in government budget terms. Aurora's general budget, for example, is more than $320 million. But even though, in quotes, marijuana legalization won't solve any big budget crises, any extra revenue is nice, especially if it allows the funding of programs that wouldn't otherwise get funding, and end quote. Let's talk about rumor versus reality. There's a common conception that Colorado is significantly reducing or even resolving the homeless situation with money raised by taxing cannabis. Are we witnessing a social justice washing of the homelessness by the state, or is something else going on? Let's dig further into the numbers and find out. Now, by 2017, the funds applied to services for the unhoused in Aurora increased to just over $3 million. But the city is the only one to proactively address the needs of the unhoused with cannabis dollars. Neighboring Adams County has directed over $500,000 from their, in quotes, marijuana tax revenues to fund 4-year scholarships for 50 low-income Adams County students, while the ultimate goal is to grant $1 million through the Adams County Scholarship Fund. As of July 1st, 2016, the county has only collected $500,000 from 7 cannabis dispensaries. And I end quote. Now, some areas are addressing the risks of becoming unhoused due to the low income and the ever-increasing cost of living in the state. But Aurora is the only municipality or county that has placed a focus on the unhoused. Shout out to you, Aurora, by the way. Now, in December 2018, the Denver Post wrote about Aurora's approach to cannabis, which varies significantly from their urban neighbor, Denver. Aurora started slow, licensing only 24 cannabis dispensaries as compared to more than 200 dispensary licenses issued in Denver. Nonetheless, Aurora has gained tax benefits from cannabis sales. And I quote, Aurora was projected to take in $10 million in 2018, bringing its total since the start of legal sales in late 2014 to more than $27 million. In the report done by the Denver Post, interviewed budget manager Greg Hayes, who indicated the city chose not to use cannabis tax dollars to balance the city's general fund. Instead, they have applied the money to infrastructure such as roads and bridges, as well as applying a total of $7.3 million towards programs and resources for the unhoused, an average of 27% of the cannabis tax revenue from 2014 to 2018. Also in December of 2018, the Denver Post addressed concerns that the promise of funding schools has been muted as compared to the pre-legalization promises as of 2018. Since the first sale occurred on January 1st, 2014, that tax money has translated into about $160 million towards school construction statewide, roughly enough to build 3 high schools. Meanwhile, the state has actually collected more than $740 million. That means statewide, 21% of cannabis tax revenues have been applied to schools from 2014 to 2018. If we look at Aurora's initiative for the unhoused, 7.3 million of 740 million, close to 1/100th of cannabis tax dollars have been proactively applied to homelessness or the Unhoused. If we step out further to look at the state's total budget, cannabis tax dollars represent less than 1% of the $27.1 billion spent by government agencies every year. For those of us who want to see funds from cannabis uplift communities in need and individuals at risk, we have a dual job here. Recognize this positive result of spending $7.3 million to the needs of the unhoused, but at the same time to continue to call legislators to do more to address the challenges in our state that lead to and exacerbate the pressures that lead to homelessness. There's a secondary angle to this story, and that has to do with whether legalized regulated cannabis has increased circumstances that increase the unhoused population in Colorado. Now, in January 2020, Denver's Channel 9 News reported that data collected through the National Point in Time report shows a downward trend in homelessness as the population grew from 2012 through 2019. However, they point out that in 2012, the federal government changed the definition of homelessness to include a smaller number of people. In that report, Andrew Spinks, who works at Denver's St. Francis Center, indicated that the number of people relying on the center has remained consistent over several years.
Ever since marijuana was legalized, we've heard claims that it brought a bunch of people who are homeless to Denver. That's not what new statistics suggest, but numbers could always use some context, and our Anusha Roy is pretty good at that.
Between 2012 and 2019, a lot has changed in Denver, including legalizing recreational marijuana.
There were concerns about would we be attracting people to Denver.
That concern caught national attention, and locally, those who worked with the homeless community were sharing their stories.
Don't really ask people why they moved into the area. When we did have those conversations, there were some people that said yes, that was something that they were considering.
Today, we got something more definitive, a set of numbers from the city that shows as the population of Denver went up, the number of homeless in the city in general was going down. On the surface, it seems to say one thing about these concerns.
For persons experiencing homelessness who are unsheltered is that it's been relatively flat.
But critics of legalized pot, smart approach to marijuana, says sales of legalized recreational marijuana didn't really take off until 2014. They say if you look at the homeless count between then and last year, the numbers slightly grew. They say while that's not enough to draw a direct link between the two, they are going to continue to watch the numbers. But changing laws isn't what Andrew Spinks is worried about.
Our climate is excellent. There's lots of employment opportunities. The issue is housing.
He looked at the downward trend in the city data and said the St. Francis daytime shelter is not sharing that trend.
Numbers for us have remained very steady through the year.
In 2012, the feds changed their definition of homelessness, which meant fewer people were considered homeless, and Spinks believes the city is undercounting people.
Point in time is a bit of an undercount because it's a snapshot. It just takes a one moment count of everybody who's unhoused in the Denver area, Metro Denver, and we need more of a video.
A concern the city acknowledges.
And we believe that that happens to some degree, but we think by seeing the over time numbers, you can see the pattern.
So the St. Francis Center said, yeah, like, the count isn't perfect, but it's also the only thing they have, so they're trying to use it accordingly. And the city said they've been trying to improve their methods on actually reaching more people, learning where they're staying, and using new partners to be able to reach them as well, just because they're trying to get the most accurate count as well.
So the city likes to ask people this question when they have a captive audience, say in jail.
Oh, yes.
They'll ask, what brings you to Denver?
Yeah, okay, so the state did do a study about this, and they found that homeless inmates said one of the reasons they came was because of the access to marijuana, but that number was no higher than other inmates who were not homeless, so it was the same.
Yeah, I feel like our takeaway here is that people who are homeless like marijuana, and people who have homes like marijuana as well.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right, great, we solved it.
Solved that one.
Solved it, thank you, Nisha.
Got it.
So in May 2019, the Chicago Tribune hyped the problem, writing, anecdotally, homeless shelters in Colorado reportedly have seen a surge in homeless people attracted to the state by legal weed. A study by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development found that Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, 3 states with legalized, in quotes, marijuana, were among the top 4 states with an increase in the chronically homeless people between 2017 and 2018. How do we balance these two reports? Now, how do we balance these two reports? Is homelessness stabilizing and declining against a growing housed population, or exploding due to a migration of unhoused stoners on their way to Colorado? Now, Reason.org conducted some thorough analysis into this question, which we will dive into in our next episode. Thank you for joining us on this episode of shit. Here we go. Let's do it again. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Cannabis News. Till next time,
stay tuned.